Welcome back and thanks for staying with us. You're still tuning to Eagles 102.3 FM Abuja, and this is your radio experience. You can count on 26 minutes gone past the hour of 11. And what we do at the 11 o'clock hour typically is talk about the mind and the body. Now, today's conversation is one that I really tried my best to have, a professional come into the studio to tell us what we know or what they know about this illness because of the delicate nature of that illness. And seen as is one that had been eradicated from the system many years ago, only to have that come back into the African system, something must have gone wrong. But yes, today we are talking smallpox, and it is one of the deadliest diseases ever known. And today, many times, if you want to talk about smallpox, the W Health, why do I keep saying W Health? The World Health Organization, all right, reported that that is the only human disease to be eradicated so far. Now, it's one of the deadliest diseases known to humans, and it is called smallpox. Now, it remains the only human disease to have been eradicated, but I don't think that title is going to, be there for so long, seeing as there was an outbreak of smallpox here in Nigeria. And, so far we have recorded about 30 cases, no casualties, but I mean 30 cases here in Nigeria, including the FCT. Now, many people believe that the achievement at that time is because of the milestone reached in the global public health. It's because of the vaccination. Now, key components of the worldwide smallpox eradication effort included universal childhood immunization programs in some countries, mass vaccination in other countries, and targeted surveillance containment strategies during the end game. Now, over thousands of years, right, smallpox has killed hundreds of millions of people, both the rich, the poor, the old, the young. It was a disease that didn't discriminate, killing at least 1 in 3 infected people. So often more, in the more severe form of disease. Now, the symptoms of this smallpox was very gruesome, and it is still very gruesome. And some of these symptoms include high fever, vomiting, mouth sores, followed by fluid-filled, lesions on the whole body. You'd see the body, like when you have a burn, maybe hot water pours on your hand or something, that feeling, have something like water in it. That's what it looked like. It was all over the body, and death will suddenly come within 2 weeks of that infection. Now, survivors could be left with permanent harm such as blindness, infertility, in the most severe forms of diseases. So it was a very severe disease. It was super severe, and it cost the life of many people. Now, it wasn't something that was limited to Africa alone. People in Egypt, in different parts of the country. In fact, history says that the smallpox was highly infectious, and it didn't have any cure. And it began as early as 1350 BCE, with cases being found in the study of Egyptian mummies. Now, Egyptian mummies are, it was a way that the Egyptians normally will bury their dead. They would wrap them up in this white clothing, not, I mean, with bandages, wrap them up and put them, in the casket or whatever. That was how, the Egyptians buried at that time. So they were called Egyptians mummies. It was an ancient practice for them. Now, and smallpox was said to have emanated from that right there. However, so many things connected to the history of smallpox that we might not be able to get into right now, but it was eradicated. In fact, the World Health Organization celebrated that the world was free from smallpox, only to have that come back again in 2024. Now, it is super important that we talk about these things, seeing the deadly nature of this disease. So I'm giving you context to that so that you know the severity of the symptoms and the effect of smallpox, so that we can stay healthy at all times and avoid being, infected with smallpox. Now, it is caused by variola virus. That's what it's being called, a variola virus, which belongs to the poxvirus family. And now this virus is spread through direct contact with an infected person's skin's lesion. That is the water from that I told you that when you have smallpox, you'd have, all those water on the body of the person, like when you get burnt by fire or something. So when the water from that person's body touches your own skin, you are most likely going to have smallpox as well. If you have direct contact with an infected person's skin lesion or respiratory droplets like saliva, when someone sneezes and droplets of the person's saliva, touches your body. When someone who has smallpox sweats and it touches your own skin as well. Respiratory droplets and contaminated objects, bedding or clothing. It's a very deadly disease because it can be spread through things that are perceived as common. Imagine lying on the same bedding with somebody and you're able to get smallpox because you laid on the bedding of someone who had smallpox. Now, it's not the bedding itself that transfers the disease, right? Or that infects somebody, but because droplets of that, what's the name again? That's fluid, lesions. It's called lesions. The droplets of that fluid might be on the beddings when the person had laid down on it, and you come and lie down on it also, and that thing touches your skin. You are prone to having that disease. Now, airborne transmission through coughing or sneezing, like I said, also is one of the causes of this smallpox virus. It is super deadly because when someone has it, it only takes a number of time before they contaminate the environment and infect the other people in that environment as them. Now, they have certain symptoms, and symptoms are basically things that people exhibit when they have a certain illness. Now, smallpox also does have symptoms, and the incubation period for that symptom is 10 to 14 days. So, when you are infected with smallpox, in 10 to 14 days, you will start to manifest these symptoms. And one thing I'll always say is, they'll tell you if symptoms persist after 24 hours, go see your doctor. Once you notice that there's a change in your system, and that's why it's important to be vigilant about your system. When something changes in your body, you should know, right? So the incubation period is 10 to 14 days. Once you notice that you're having incessant fever, incessant headache, you start manifesting certain symptoms, whether it is smallpox or not, whether it is malaria or not, always go to the doctor to get diagnosed so that they will know what it is. The earlier these things are being detected, the better for the person who is manifesting these symptoms. Now, the initial symptoms for smallpox is, fever, headaches, fatigue, where someone is extremely tired all the time, muscle pain, nausea, and vomiting. Now, the characteristic symptoms is what the person manifests after the incubation period. And some of these things are flat red markers that progresses to raised bumps, fluid-filled blisters, pus-filled blisters, scabs, on the skin. Rash typically starts on the face and then goes to the arms and the legs and then spreads to the trunk and then the entire body. So before during the incubation period, that's when you are infected. The symptoms you would have again is fever, headaches, fatigue, muscle pain, nausea, and vomiting. Now, but after the incubation period, when the characteristics of smallpox start to manifest, what you'd see majorly or basically is rash, that progresses into raised bumps, those bumps you see. It's not like chickenpox because chickenpox doesn't have raised bumps. When someone has acne, I don't know, how to best describe that, but raised bumps, and those bumps are usually filled with fluid and some are filled with pus and crust on the skin. Now, the rash on the face or the rash from smallpox typically starts from the face, spreads to the arms and then the legs, and spreads to the entire trunk. Now, let's talk about the treatment of smallpox. And I read that in history they said it's a very deadly disease. The Egyptians didn't think that smallpox had any sort of treatment whatsoever because it takes only a period of time, within 2 weeks, and then you experience casualties from smallpox if it is not properly treated, or the person is not under examination by the doctor or close supervision by the doctor. Now the treatment, it says that there's no specific treatment for smallpox, but supportive care like rest, hydration, and pain management, because the bumps on the body are usually very painful. It has pus, it has fluid, and it's usually very painful. Now they also place people who have smallpox on antiviral medications for severe cases or high risk individuals. They put them on antiviral medications now to boost their immunity, to boost their system, basically. Now, complications management. People who have these things can have major complications such as pneumonia, encephalitis. These are the complications of smallpox. Now, because we are not doctors and I am not a doctor, what I would advise you to do is, when you have smallpox, when you manifest the characteristic symptoms or the incubation period or the initial symptoms, you should go make your way to the doctor so that you can get tested, treated, and managed in a health facility. Now, what can you do to prevent smallpox? These are things that were done at the time when Nigeria was still smallpox endemic, and the world was still endemic to smallpox before the eradication of that disease. Now, certain things that were done to prevent it was vaccination. And vaccination was, there was vaccination for smallpox at that time. It's just like when children are being immunized for, I think, tuberculosis in children, when children had immunization for meningitis, when these things were still very prevalent, right? You receive vaccinations for it so that it can suppress the manifestation, no, not the manifestation of the symptoms. It can suppress the illness, basically. So sometimes, even if you are vaccinated, you can still come down with the illness, but it will not be fatal like when you don't have any sort of vaccination. So one of the ways to prevent smallpox at that time was vaccination. Now, the smallpox vaccine, according to WHO, is 90 to 95% effective in preventing the infection. Now, vaccination is no longer a routine, but recommended for laboratory workers handling the virus. It's like the COVID vaccine. People who were interfacing with people who came down with COVID were always given the vaccine, or were advised to take the vaccine so that they don't come down with the illness as well. Now, vaccination was advised for people or routine workers or people who worked in the laboratory and handling the virus, directly. Now, the vaccine was also recommended for military personnel and healthcare workers in high-risk areas because of the nature of their job. Now, personal protective equipment, that's PPE kits. We also saw that during COVID, where they had the helmet, the white clothing, just to prevent them from having contact with the fluid, contact with the person, or droplets that could ensure that you get infected by that illness as well. Now, isolation also and quarantine measures to contain the outbreak. So when people had the outbreaks, when people had, when people came down with the illness, they were, before they even come down, remember what happened in COVID? We were all in quarantine or quarantine or whatever it's being called. We're all locked indoors to ensure that the outbreak of that illness was contained. It's the same thing with smallpox. The prevention of that illness is quarantine, for people to be indoors to contain the outbreak of that illness as well. Now, like I said, let me give you, a little bit of that history again. Now, it has been a major human disease for over 3,000 years. So it's not a new thing. It just only came back. Now, global vaccination efforts led by the World Health Organization resulted in last naturally occurring case in 1977, and that was in Somalia. Now, official eradication declaration was in 1980, when it was officially announced by the World Health Organization that, smallpox were being eradicated completely. Now, only 2 certified stockpiles of the virus remain. That's CDC in the US and Moscow Research Center in Russia. Only these 2 areas, or only these 2 stockpiles of the virus remain. So I'm guessing that these people will swing into action almost immediately, because, there's a report of the outbreak of that virus again. And they would most definitely, I know they're not in Nigeria, but they'll swing into action, because if it's in Nigeria, it only takes a number of time before it spreads across different parts of the city and the world as well. Now, a lot of people are scared of vaccination because of the side effects that it usually will have. For smallpox, the effects are mild reactions as pain, redness, and swelling at the injection site. Now, some people might come down with fever, with headaches, rare but serious reactions, allergic reactions, and some people, for severe cases, would have brain damage, inflammation of the brain, and what have you. Now, smallpox has been eradicated. It was reported to have been eradicated at that time of the year. But the treatment and prevention remains essential to prepare for the response to potential future threats. And here we are, we are in the future threat right now. So I hope that we did get a thing or two from these very short mind and body segment of the show. We talked about smallpox today, and if you're just joining us, we talk about the current risk and concern. We talked about vaccination side effects, the history and eradication. We talked about prevention, treatment, and symptoms, causes as well. And again, I hope that someone did pay attention to these things, seeing how dangerous it is, seeing how, easily contactable it is. This is, I advise that, you keep your environments clean as well, and ensure that you go for periodic checks, because some of these things you would never know until they start to manifest characteristic symptoms, which, it might be too late to deal with at a certain time. So this will bring us to the end of the Mind and Body segment of the Midday Extra show for today. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you for applying everything that you have learned right here and right now. This is me signing out to prepare for the next hour. Keep it locked in. Here is Martha of the Midday Extra show, and I definitely will be right back.
Do you have questions about your health? Well,